Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
Since we are talking about a very indie turn of the century gay film, I just wanted to give everybody kind of a platform to talk about underseen queer films and what they like, what more people should check out. We know the Captain Obvious ones, but a lot of people haven't seen Chuck and Buck, or at least from the people that I follow on Letterboxd, so I would definitely recommend it, and we're going to get into that. But what are some other unseen gems that people should check out? Charlie?
Yeah, there's a film by Andrei Teshine named Wild Reeds that's really underseen, and the reason being it's very hard to access, which is a bummer. It was occasionally on Mubi and Netflix, but I don't think it's available right now. It's in France in 1962, and basically the Algerian War is coming to a close, and this teenager, Francois, basically has a girlfriend, but they're not they're not really physically attracted to each other so much as they are best friends, and he also has a new roommate who he starts to have feelings for, and there's also an English teacher that's going through certain certain shifts in terms of her emotional well-being as a result of the war. There's also someone who, an exchange student who grew up in Algeria and now is in France, and so it's a very political film, but also very much about. I mean, it's all about teen angst, and figuring out your identity, and by setting it within this specific time in France's history, it's just an incredible portrait of youth and all of the highs and lows that come with it, especially when, with everything going on right now in our 2022 world, with the world feeling like it's been on fire for 2 years, it's actually very cathartic for me to see, coming of age and coming to terms with sexual identity when this, in a part of the world that I've never been to France, and I'm terrible with European history, so it feels both enlightening and also makes me feel seen, very much so. So, yeah. I don't know if I did a good job of summing that up, but you should check that one out.
You have the poster of that, don't you?
I do, in my room. It's not like an authentic one. It's like, what's the term?
Reprint?
Reprint. It's a reprint, but...
So you're a fake fan? Okay, Bryden, what are your choices? No, I mean that's a market that I would not want to be in. Like, cool, it would be awesome to have an original poster, but it's like, are you doing that for you, or to be like, look at this, an original poster, and they're just like, yeah, it's great, don't really care. But Bryden, do you have some picks?
Yeah, I have a list of underseen movies according to what's seen on Letterboxd. One movie, I think maybe this is a good movie to talk about, especially because I'm Canadian. This is a French-Canadian movie called Genesis. Jeunesse is its French title. By Philippe Lesage. It's about two different characters in the movie, brother and sister. I think they might be step siblings in the movie, because I think they have their parents are going through their second marriages. But the primary story of the queer coming of age follows this young student at a prep school, a guy played by this really good actor Theodore Pellerin, who's been in a couple of American movies There's Someone Inside Your House, the Netflix slasher that came out last fall. He was in Never Rarely, Sometimes Always, and Boy Erased. He plays a guy who's pretty popular and charismatic, and he's always hanging out with his one best friend. But then he starts to realize he might have some feelings for his best friend, and the sort of heartbreaking part of the movie is he tries to show his feelings for his friend after a drunken night out, and his friend doesn't reciprocate. And there's this incredible classroom monologue where they're back at school and they have to give a presentation for their English class in English because they primarily speak French in this Quebec school. And it's a really moving scene for how Pellerin is expressing himself in a language. His character is expressing himself in a language that he's not entirely familiar with, and it sort of mirrors how he's going through these unfamiliar emotions, and the way he sort of like oscillates between like, you know, like this very like goofy sort of like jokey charisma where he's like saying, oh, I'm gonna tell you about a very nice guy, and then like he becomes like gradually more sincere and like starts like slowing down as he like tries to like find the words to like come up with his feelings and everything. And then like the scene has like a very realistic ending where like the friend like leaves the class, and then the teacher is just sort of like, okay, so anyone else want to present? It's just like it's a very tender and sincere moment, but like it is like very realistic how like the fallout is kind of awkward. And I won't give away much more of like what happens in the rest of that movie, but that thread of the movie I think really gets to the heart of sort of queer longing with that character. It's a beautiful film. I think it's available on some streaming services, so if anyone wants to check out, I would highly recommend it.
I had a couple good cries during that movie because I was like,
It's on Tubi, so you can watch it for free.
There are some moments, it's actually all the ones you just mentioned, where I was just like, oh my god, I feel so seen and also devastated because this is like, I dealt with so much of the stuff that Theodore Pellerine, you know, not in the same ways, of course, but that sense of longing and that loneliness that he has. Because what I love about it, too, is he's, like, not an unpopular kid. He's actually kind of an asshole most of the time, too. And he actually got my number one vote for actor that year. And I'm pretty sure I was the only one who'd seen that movie. So it wasn't going to go anywhere.
Damn.
But for my money, that was the best performance of, I think in the US it came out in 2019. So, yeah. I think I had Adam Sandler and Antonio Banderas below them for Uncut Gems and
Pain and Glory.
Pain and Glory, yeah. But yeah, seconding Bryden's recommendation, it's a great film.
Yeah, I'll go with a short and a film. You know, I wouldn't say King of Thinger is underseen, but just you could watch all of his. He only has ever done shorts. You can watch pretty much all of his shorts in like an hour and a half and 2 hours, but Scorpio Rising is just phenomenal, and it's one of my favorite things about any movie is if they use a needle drop correctly, and then every time I listen to that song I think of the movie and it makes me love the movie more, and vice versa. Recently with Teton that happened really well, but watch like all of his shorts in like an hour and a half and they are just off the wall, just amazing stuff. And then for movies, I would think that people have seen Gregoraki movies, but being that I've been trying to buy all of his movies, like only Mysterious Skin and I think White Bird and the Blizzard are available past DVD.
Yeah.
And all of the DVDs are way out of print, so it's like, I know Criterion put a few of his movies up on the channel like last year or 2 years ago, but it's like, those need a Blu-ray release, like no other. Like all of his movies, like even if I'm not the biggest fan of them, I still like them because he does stuff that nobody else did around that time. And also it's just for like the Apocalypse trilogy, it's just like peak 90s, just gonzo shit, just wild stuff. Like Doom Generation doesn't work a lot of the times, but it's so much fun. Like so much stuff is going on. It's a blast to watch. So yeah, just watch any Rocky movie you can see.
I don't even think Nowhere has a DVD. I don't think it ever came out on DVD, and that sucks because that's one of my favorites of his.
Yeah, I looked that up on eBay, and it was like a one where people have pretty much printing it on demand type of thing. But yeah, I don't think official release, maybe overseas, but yeah. And Doom Generation is long out of print. That's like $50 online. I'm just like, god damn. I assume his stuff isn't like caught up in rights or anything if Criterion can get a majority of them, so I hope a box set from like Arrow or Criterion would be awesome. But it's just I'm a big fan of like the new queer cinema people from like the early 90s, like Todd Haynes and him and stuff like that. I need to see like Swoon. I really want to see Swoon. That's on the Criterion channel. I need to watch that. But yeah, like of course anything 90s I'm going to be down for. I just recently watched his MTV pilot that didn't get picked up, that I think was filmed in like 99 or 2000, and man, there's like 30 needle drops and they all rule because he's like the best with putting music in. And it kind of it's not one of those. It's like, oh man, what could have they done with this? It's like just one episode that like works as a short film because it's just bonkers.
Yeah.
But Gavin, do you have any choices?
I mean, seconding all of those except for the ones I haven't seen, which I won't tell you what they are.
Okay.
But the one that immediately popped into my brain was Derek Jarman's Edward II from '91.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love Derek Jarman. Speaking of new queer cinema and his postmodern style, it's an adaptation of the Christopher Marlowe play. Edward II, who has a lover, Piers Gaveston, and a wife played by Tilda Swinton, who is I'm trying to think of the right word. She just hates that her husband has a gay lover and is gay.
Mm-hmm.
And the tension there and the war, and he does all of the Edward's army as gay rights protesters, and it's a very veritable mix of things. It's it actually says it's 91, but there's a lot of medieval styling. Annie Lennox pops up at one point to do Cole Porter's Every Time We Say Goodbye. Like it's just a feast for the eyes and all of the senses, and it's unfortunate that we didn't get more films from him. Very appreciative of the ones that we have. Even the ones that are just basically collages are so much fun.
It also did recently get a pretty awesome I don't know if it's a 4K transfer, but it is a Blu-ray. It came out a couple years ago, which I have. And
Who put that out?
I'm forgetting, but I own it. I can run to my room and grab it if
No,
you want me to know.
I think Bryden is doing the research for us. He's like, I got it. Yeah, I saw that they put that up on the Criterion channel for the Sundance 92 entries, and I was like, oh, I'm not the biggest fan of like costume dramas or whatever, but I was like, this is
very much not.
right, because right around this time I also watched Orlando, and I was just like, costume drama, okay, and then by the end of it I was like, okay, that was a lot different, and it fucking ruled. So
it looks like Film Movement might have put it out in 2018.
Yeah.
Okay,
according to Blu-ray.com, so take that with a grain of salt, but hopefully that website's accurate, but yeah.
I spend way too much time on there. Check out Nightmare on Elm Street 2. There you go.
Oh,
always.
Yes.
I actually haven't seen that movie since I was in the closet, which I thought it was terrible, and now I'm sure if I watch it,
rewatch it.
I'm sure I will love it now. Yeah.
For a second there, I was worried that you were saying you hadn't seen it at all, and I was like,
oh no.
And watch the documentary about it, which is also really good.
Yeah, because they outed him, right? The main actor. Didn't they kind of out him, and they kind of morphed it into a queer movie once they kind of
No.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
It was like no. That's not a. I've heard people say that it's not like a completely wrong take or anything. It's I think it was more so just like he got outed by the media type thing, like afterwards, and then it had this cycle of like when it first came out, they were like, oh, they made this like so gay, and then now it's just like, oh, this is great. This is the initial reaction was a very negative one, and now it's a positive.
Yeah. My favorite thing too is I was very much an early DVD adopter, and so when the first Nightmare on Elm Street box set, probably still back there, came out, I devoured all the special features, and I distinctly remember the director being like, oh yeah, like everybody was like, oh, there's all this gay subtext, and of course we didn't know at the time, and blah blah blah, and then by the time you get to the documentary about that came out a couple of years ago, he's like, oh yeah, we were totally, it was all subversive. It's like, whatever, buddy. It's like
yeah, because I remember the actor like accusing him of being like,
he confronts him.
You never like through all these decades or the few decades it's been out, like I've been saying this, and you're just like, no, that was never the point. And it's like, you know how much harm that did to me? And he's like this like 70-year-old guy that's just like, fuck, I don't know, I don't remember.
He's like, I don't know, bondage in the gym with the teacher, whatever.
Oh yeah, don't they like towel whip him in the ass to death or something? Oh
yeah. My favorite continuity error in any movie comes in that scene, and I know that's not what this podcast is about.
Please,
but there's when all the stuff's coming off the wall and assaulting him, there's a scene where you watch a basketball fly off a wall and then a volleyball hit him and then a basketball bounce away in a series of 3 cuts. And so it's just basketball, volleyball, basketball. And it's like, I don't know, I guess volleyballs are softer? I don't know like what the thought process was.
Not much, but sure. Yeah.
But they're also very different looking.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure by the second cut when they were just like, yeah, we used a volleyball, and then somebody was just like, what is this basketball doing here? And they're just like, we used a basketball. That's right.
Yeah. Just match action it in.
Yeah. Welcome to Almost Major. We are a podcast talking about the many major studios and the films they release. We are about halfway through our quest of Artisan. I'm very sad to see it go, but I'm happy for our next miniseries. But we are doing an episode today on Chuck and Buck from 2000. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Charlie Nash.
Hello.
And Bryden Doyle.
Hey.
And this week we have a special guest. I love his podcast so much. It is Gavin from the Mixed Reviews. How are you?
I'm good. Hello. Thank you for having me on. I like that I always do this. I always wave. I know a podcast is not a visual medium. I just do it.
We have the description. What is it called? Like whenever you're watching something, you can turn it on where it describes to you. And
text.
It's like, Gavin is waving. Yeah. I'll put it in post. But like I said, I'm a huge fan of your podcast. A few weeks ago, probably about a few weeks ago, I went to like your first few episodes that were like really, really short, and I was used to the original ones, and then I eventually got to the point where you guys started to like really break down the career, and I was like, that's the good shit right there. And it's just like being able to see the podcast grow really made me happy.
Yeah, it started as a very different show. It was an idea that my co-host Louis, who was supposed to be here tonight and unfortunately couldn't make it, but he was going to, he like came up with this idea with me because I'd had all this previous podcasting experience. And the more that like I do all the posts on it, the more I was like, oh, well, we can really like pump this full of information because I love information. Yeah. I'm a very nerdy. So the more I can learn about things, the more complete I guess I feel as a human being. And so that's really the thesis now, is that every episode we try and put as much history as we possibly can. And we have opinions along the way. We don't always agree on all the films because there are some stinkers in a lot of people's careers. There's a lot of weird choices in a lot of people's careers.
My favorite thing is I'll just be looking for movies and it'll be like movie that nobody has seen on Letterboxd, and I see you've seen it and you've given it like a star, and I'm just like, I'm gonna add it to my watch list. Sounds great. Sounds great. And I look at the people and I was like, oh, he definitely had to cover that, unfortunately. I do believe I need to ambush you about the new metal hate that is on your episodes. As a 15-year-old boy at heart who always hates his parents, I just really feel, just we get looked down a lot, I mean, just you need to recognize what Fred Durst has done for our culture. That's all I'm saying.
So when we say those words, do you feel them crawling in your skin?
Yeah.
There's wounds they cannot heal. I was like Googling the lyrics real quick. I'm like, fuck, what are the words? Linkin Park.
I didn't listen to that album in full last week. I'm a grown man. I listened to pitchfork things, respectful things.
That's okay. Last week I revisited Beck's Midnight Vultures. So
that's a great album.
That's a great album.
It's my favorite. My favorite Beck album. So I know he's done much more meaningful stuff. Everybody always tells me when they're like, oh yeah, Sea Change. And I'm like, yeah, Sea Change is great. But you know what? I want to hear about Midnight Vultures. I want to hear about all the sex freaks.
Yeah, I want to hear an album that has variation. Like Sea Change is great, but it's just 50 minutes of Sad Boy. I want to hear some beats. I want to hear Sex Laws, man. Come on.
Have you seen 6 Feet Under, Gavin?
Yeah.
I just remember that episode where like Peter Krause is like, Odelay by Beck, and then like he has a vision of Lisa being like, you're gonna throw our child's future away for fucking Beck? I don't know why that just popped into my head.
Yeah, that's me. That's basically me. To a T.
Yeah. I'm not seeing Korn at the end of this month, just letting you know that's not happening whatsoever. Anyways, we're here to talk about Chuck and Buck, which unfortunately does not have a new metal soundtrack.
Nor does it feature music by any of the bands we just mentioned.
Yeah.
I know.
Are you suggesting They Might Be Giants is not new metal?
They seem like a band that would just like, you remember the new metal song They Might Be Giants did? Yeah. Chuck and Buck premiered at Sundance January 2000. It had a limited release in the US July 14th, 2000, and it came in at number 42 in 7 theaters. The widest it went was 46 theaters. Top 5 that week was X-Men, Scary Movie, The Perfect Storm, The Patriot, and The Kid.
Oh my god, I forgot about Disney's The Kid.
We all did.
Yeah. That was it. Was it that its title, Disney's The Kid?
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Because like there's the Charlie Chaplin movie, The Kid. Was that like to like avoid confusion? Is that maybe why?
Yeah,
I hope
a lot of people were just like, "Oh shit, they restored Charlie Chaplin's The Kid," and they were just like, "Why the fuck is Bruce Willis in this?" Yeah,
Everybody at my Chaplin convention that month was very upset. It was just not a good thing.
One of the most adorable things I've ever seen was I went and saw a double feature of City Lights and The Circus at the Brattle Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and there were a lot of children there, and there was one kid who did the tramp walking.
Oh my god.
And my heart nearly melted because I was just like, there is hope for a generation, the upcoming generation, to be in love with cinema and not just, Marvel bullshit. Sorry if that.
Oh, he learned it from Benny and June.
Oh,
if you want to.
Yeah, that's true. He was a big early Depp head. Yeah. Something new that I would like to insert now on is the top song the week that this was released. And number 1 in the US was Everything You Want by Vertical Horizon. And the number 1 song in Canada was It's Gonna Be Me by NSYNC. So Canada wins once again.
For whatever reason, I assumed it was going to be the Space Between by Dave Matthews Band. Wasn't that around the same time?
Probably,
I heard
yeah.
that song growing up so many times. So many times.
Same. We did talk about Dave Matthews Band a few episodes ago about the Matrix soundtrack.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we did.
Weird. The budget for this was $250,000. Domestically, it grossed $1 million, and overall, it grossed $1.1 million. For the quick plot synopsis, Chuck and Buck is a story of a childlike young man who becomes fixated on his one-time best friend, now a cool, polished young record executive. I didn't write this. Charting the collision of two individuals, once inseparable, who have responded in opposite ways to the onset of adulthood, the film takes a clear-eyed, sensitive look at childhood and the consequence of hanging on to too tightly or renouncing it too thoroughly. Sure. Directed by Miguel Arteta, is his second film. First being a film called Star Maps, which Mike White is also in. After this, he does The Good Girl, also with Mike White writing it in 2002, Youth and Revolt in 2009. He has done episodes of Succession, Enlightened, and 6 Feet Under. Written by Mike White. Prior to this, he wrote Dead Man on Campus in 1998. I need to watch that again. That's a Comedy Central fave right there.
He's like one of like a few writers I think who's credited on that. So like, who wonders how much like his original vision is like in kept in the final cut of that movie. But yeah, he's one of the credited writers.
Okay.
The soundtrack to Dead Man on Campus, speaking of music, is amazing.
It rules.
Even though most of the artists on that are now canceled. But at the time, very good.
I, until as of recently, was a lifelong Marilyn Manson fan, and his cover of Golden Years by David Bowie is really fucking good. Unfortunately,
I'm a huge David Bowie fan, and I think it is a very good cover. I think the highlight of that album is actually the cover of I Only Want to Be With You, with Twiggy Ramirez on guitar, and Twiggy the supermodel singing the lyrics. It's Twiggy and Twiggy.
Wow, how do I not?
He's also canceled though, so that's
right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Take it with the,
yeah, that was first, and everybody was just like, "Wow, Marilyn Manson denounced this guy. What a stand-up guy." 1 year later, I need to get that soundtrack and the Spawn soundtrack on CD. Anyways, Mike White also wrote on Dawson's Creek and Freaks and Geeks. After he wrote Orange County, which I just recently rewatched, and it fucking rules. It's so good.
He's so funny as the English teacher talking about the Shakespeare adaptations. Romeo and Juliet, Chocolat, Waterworld.
Talented Mr. Ripley, Gladiator, Chocolat. Yeah. Like I said, he wrote The Good Girl in 2002, School of Rock in 2003, and created the TV series Enlightened and The White Lotus, which I need to watch. Starring Mike White as Buck, small roles, and most of his stuff he's written. Not really this is pretty much his feature acting movie. Like I said, he's in Orange County and School of Rock and stuff like that. Chris Weitz as Chuck. Prior to this, he directed American Pie in 1999. Afterwards, he directs Down to Earth in 2001, About a Boy in 2002, Twilight and New Moon in 2009. Doesn't do much acting. Also, I think he wrote Rogue One. Like, this guy has the wildest career.
It's like, again, that's another case of like, I think he's like one of several writers credited.
Right. Because that movie went through this shit. Yeah.
It's funny too that his the first thing next to his picture in IMDb is a trailer for Chuck and Buck. Which I just noticed. Maybe it's because I clicked on it from the Chuck and Buck's page, and maybe that's why it popped up. But very strange, because I feel like, you know, I had seen this movie before, and I completely forgot it was Chris Weitz as Chuck. So
right, and I think his brother is also in it.
Yeah,
his brother plays the actor
who's playing his like counterpart in the play, which is really funny casting when you think about it.
Okay, that guy's amazing.
He's so funny in this. Yeah.
There's a weird bit of Hollywood trivia, and it has nothing to do with this movie, but their like grandmother, I want to say, I'm not sure which side of their family it's on, but their grandmother was Lupita Tovar, who is Mina Harker in the Spanish Dracula from the 30s.
Wow.
And they're actually making a movie about her.
Oh.
What?
But like I never would have known that Lupita Tovar is their grandmother, because they are very white-looking men. So
yeah. Just the I know I brought this up on a previous podcast, but the fact that they made American Pie and then just made nothing like that ever again. It was just like, it was almost like how directors get into horror to start their career, and then they're just like, no, we're serious now.
I'm just imagining him reading the Golden Compass on the set of American Pie, and it's just like, it's calling to me.
One day I'm gonna do good stuff. Lupe Ontiveros as Beverly. Prior to this, she's in Selena and As Good as It Gets in 1997. After this, she's in Storytelling from 2001 and Real Women Have Curves in 2002. Storytelling is a wild ass movie.
Oh man, that movie! I mean, I like Todd Solondz, but that movie, whew, I don't know how it would hold up today.
Yeah, I've literally not watched it since college, but I think I loved it in college, which might say terrible things about me.
I did love it in college too, but now I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, ooh,
it's a weird movie where it's like kind of an anthology, but really it's just a two-parter, and the second part is like much longer than the first part. It's
the
really
first part is like 25 minutes, and then the second part's like an hour.
It was supposed to, like, famously, it was supposed to be 3 stories, and James Van Der Beek was cast in it, and he was going to be playing like a gay college student.
That's right.
It was going to be really graphic, and I don't know the particulars, and I'm sure people come here for conjecture. So I don't know the particulars if they shot any of it or if they got
probably just ran out of money.
Yeah, but they just cut that entire story out. I'd always heard it was pressure from, because he was still on Dawson's Creek at the time, and so it was like pressure from like his image about not wanting to play a gay character. But then
maybe
or they got the dailies from the first story, and they were just like, you can't keep doing this shit. Like, we're like, we're cutting you off. What the fuck? Or like, we knew you were.
You can't be in this, but in the same year, you got to play yourself in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. That's fine. Beth Colt is Carlin. Prior to this, Carolyn. It can't be Carlin. What the fuck's wrong?
I think
it is
Carlin.
I think
Carlin. Yeah,
it is.
I thought it was Carla, but it's actually Carlin.
Okay. Prior to this, she was in Star Maps, and nothing after this. I didn't really research her, but I mean, she was in this, and I think she was really good. But
I was gonna say, I forgot how good she is because I had not seen this movie in a long time, and I watched it, and I think that's a really hard character to navigate. And I know you haven't even gotten to the plot description yet. Well, not in like an in-depth sort of way, but she's a character that could easily slide into the sort of trope of the
nagging wife.
Yeah, and they do a really good job of fleshing her out and making her like, I forgot how sort of heartbreaking it is when she finally confronts Buck and he's like, we did stuff as a kid, and she's like, I know all about that, unfazed, and he's kind of like, ugh, like I no longer have the upper hand,
right?
Like he thought that was his like one bargaining chip that would like make her go away, and she's kind of like, yeah, whatever, kids, I don't know, what do you want from me?
He was like,
it's
this has been my whole life. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Maya Rudolph is actually in this. I completely forgot that. As Jamila. Prior to this, she's in Gattaca and As Good as It Gets also in 1997. SNL cast member from 1999 to 2007. After this, pretty much any movie that stars an SNL cast member, she's in it. And she's always good in it. Recently was in Licorice Pizza and Booksmart. Trivia. There's really only one thing. Mike White's performance as Buck is Jeff Bridges' most favorite acting performance of the 2000s. I would like to find this interview where they're just like, he's just like, have you ever seen Chuck and Buck? It's really funny.
It's a New York Times, I think, video where it's like black and every actor is like filmed in black and white, and it, like Jeff Bridges says that Morgan Freeman talks about Meryl Streep, and I think like Sam Worthington talks about like Eddie Murphy. Anytime he has to play multiple characters, just have to do that. That's my favorite performance.
You haven't seen Norbit. It's great. Yeah.
First of all, just the fact that Sam Worthington's name got brought up, he's smiling somewhere.
Oh, the late 2000s. What a time.
Yeah.
Oh, are we talking about the New York Times video?
Yep.
Yeah, I watched that.
Yeah.
I did love that, was it Zoe Saldana gave a shout out to Tai Wai? Shit, I'm forgetting her name and I feel terrible. But the main actress of Lust Caution, I thought was...
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
And what a good performance. You know what? Zoe Saldana's right.
Yeah, that was the most inspired pick out of all of them, in my opinion. Yeah, Tang Wai. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Apologies if I'm butchering it. But yeah.
Yeah, my favorite performance of the 2010s is Zoe Saldana and Colombiana.
Gosh.
You can't say that I'm wrong or right because none of you have seen it.
I guess I have.
It existed.
You have?
Yeah, I was going to say I've seen it.
Buddy, I own it on DVD. Or, not I own it on DVD, but we got it from, like, my dad's birthday one year. I think he probably fell asleep while watching it. But...
Is that the movie where in the trailer where they say, never forget where you came from, like 3 times or something?
Brian, is that a basement DVD? It's got to be.
Oh, for sure. That's where all the DVDs are.
We're going to do a Patreon series, and it's just going to be, I don't know what movie we're doing this week. Brian's just going to go find a DVD.
Side note, do you have like a box of DVDs in your basement where you're like, well, I'm keeping this, but I'm not displaying it for everyone? Because I definitely have a box like that in my basement where I'm just like, yeah, I own this at one point. I have no urge to let people know it's in my possession or in my home. Like
I don't have that. Maybe I should think about it though.
Yeah.
It's just like, what is it? Is it like really sexual? It's like, no, I just don't want people to know I own a Big Daddy. You know?
It's actually if you saw the contents of this box, you would think I'm not sexual ever again.
For the DVD of Chuck and Buck, it has a really fancy booklet, which, remember when movies like Chuck and Buck, which made no movie, just has commentary,
no money,
special features, has a nice booklet, when people actually cared about things with home video. Anyways, the little few paragraphs on here are really interesting. It says, Chuck and Buck is one of the few DV projects for Blow Up Pictures, the digital production company founded by Open City's Jason Collette and Joanna Vicente. DV, unlike traditional film, offers many creative possibilities to filmmakers with vision with a limited budget. Director Miguel Arteta explained, I saw the film The Celebration, which is the Dogma 95 movie, I presume.
Yes.
And that was the movie that convinced me that digital video was a great format to tell dramatic stories that work because you're allowed into the most intimate parts of a character's life. He reported that the digital enabled him to concentrate on the actors' performances to a greater degree than traditional 35mm cameras would allow. We did a lot of rehearsals while shooting. Almost always, I shot the rehearsals after we blocked the scene. Because it was tape, we had the luxury to see what would happen. happen. We were also able to shoot with 2 cameras, which allowed us to capture the interaction between the actors in real time. He added that because DV also lends itself to quicker shooting and hence shorter interruptions, that intimacy could be maintained. The cinematographer that worked with Arteta to understand the character's emotions, something Chavez said DV does beautifully. Chavez, the cinematographer, commented, because it is so little, we were able to put the camera places that would be more difficult for a regular camera. For instance, we were able to shoot in a very, very small bathroom. That is a small-ass bathroom they shoot in. We could put it right in the corner on a tripod with much less rigging time, something we could have never done with a conventional camera. We still used all of our usual film tools, dolly tracks, lights, even a Steadicam mount, but the camera was so small it was much less noticeable than a big one would have been. And also, I saw in an interview from the time on IndieWire in the 2000s of Miguel Arteta, he was pretty much saying that because I watched the trailer for this on the DVD and it looked like a digital film, it looks like almost sped up, and how digital film looked like back then. But apparently they took the digital film, took the digital file, put it on film, and then that is what the DVD is. So it looks a little bit nicer, because when you look at the trailer, it looks so much cleaner and all of that.
That was a pretty common practice for that time. I am slightly older than all of you, and so I was in film school from 2002 to 2006, and so this was when we were convinced by our teachers that this was what film was going to look like, that this was the future film. We recently did an Olivia Newton-John episode, and she's in this another gay movie that is not a movie called Another Gay Movie, though I'm sure there is one at this point. But she's in Sordid Lives, and Sordid Lives is shot in the same style. And yeah, we were basically told by a lot of our instructors that this was what the future of film was going to be. This was what everything was going to look like. And this, when we were making movies, that everything was going to be this. And so it's always interesting to look back at this period and see these films that don't quite look quite right, because they're shot on these very inexpensive prosumer DV cameras, and being like this weird nostalgia for a future that didn't happen, because the technology was always going to catch up. And I don't know why our instructors wasted time trying to convince us of something that was clearly never going to be the case, especially since, as you said, a lot of the times people would make these films on DV and then still transfer them to film after they'd completed the post-production process. So it in the end, the film was just never really going to go away. It was just going to eventually evolve out.
Which is funny, because I've seen a 35 print of Party Monster, which was also shot on video.
Wow.
It's just like,
absolutely,
it's just like one. It's just like the fact that it was put on film, and it looked great, but I do believe that movie. I haven't seen it in a while. I do enjoy it, but I think the DVD is just the digital file, so it and I like that Chuck and Buck has the film look, and it doesn't look too digital, because digital around that time just looked like soap opera-y almost. It just had it was a little
worse.
bit.
Yeah.
It was just a little too fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched the trailer and I was just like, this looks odd. And not just because I watched the movie, but I was just like, it looks too real. I don't like it.
Hey, buddy, it's Charlie calling you back. Listen, we'd love to have you come to visit. The next month or two is going to be pretty bad. Carlin's folks are in town this week, but what I'll do is I'll call you after I get back from my trip, and we can work something out.
I got the freedom of the heart. It's a brand new start.
Buck, what the hell? What are you doing in LA?
I've moved here.
And you're friends with Charlie?
Oh yeah, best friends. I think we should play a game.
Fun, fun, fun. Yeah.
I'm here to see Chuck Sitter.
Hello, is Charlie there?
I'm sorry, he's not in. I'll have him call you, okay?
What's your name?
What?
What's your name?
No. There's something funny about you. You're funny, huh?
I think you have something weird about women. I think you have something weird about men.
Buck, I'm worried about you. You need to let go. You have to create something new.
I was here way before you. Look, don't call. Don't call me at home. Don't call me at the office. Just stay away. Get out, now.
Let's get into initial thoughts. Charlie?
I had seen this movie before, about 5 years ago. and rewatched it this week, and I just like I did the first time, I really dug it. I think it hits some very it hits me in a few sensitive places in terms of my own queer identity, because I think it does a great job of showing how Buck, who is obviously like emotionally stunted and psychologically stunted by his by just like by not necessarily, it's funny how he's never really like in the closet, never really says like he is, ashamed of himself, but it's clear that it is stunting him in terms of personal growth, which I can relate to, because I remember being in the closet in high school and feeling like I had gotten all my teen angst out of the way, and somehow had like 3 girlfriends. I don't know why. Probably because I was a sad kid, and then I was just like, oh, this person likes me. So I was just like, but then I remember my first breakup with a man when I was in college, and it made me so heartsick, like to a ridiculously unhealthy extent. And there's so much in this film about that examines how, being feeling ashamed of your sexual identity can stunt you in this way, in terms of what, not just in terms of like how you're able to create intimate relationships, but also in terms of like how you view yourself, because he's so clearly still just holding on to this childhood memory of him and Chuck when they were younger, and the intimate experience they had. And what I like about it is it is a very uncomfortable movie, but very funny, because it's never excusing or mocking his pain. It's just making it allows you to feel sympathetic while also being like, whoa, that's a boundary that should not be crossed, and that is not okay. But it's also never excusing, like the way that everyone interacts with him is how everyone would react. All of these fake invitations and like weirdly passive aggressive, like they want to be mean but they don't want to be too mean, and they want to be polite and stuff like that. I think it's all a really daring look at queerness, because I believe Mike White is bisexual in real life, and I feel like this is him coming. This is was probably very therapeutic to write and star in this film that has him coming to terms with his own identity. And it's not a movie for everyone. If you're looking for something like comforting, I would stay far away, because it's a very prickly film. But it's a film that, at least to me, it feels very cathartic in how it examines discomfort when it comes to figuring out who you are. So might be a little more personal take from me, and not really into the technical aspects of the film, which I'll get into. But yeah, I think it's certainly a time capsule because of as we've discussed, the DV quality, but I think it's a fascinating one, and I still think it holds up in 2022. So yeah.
Rewatching this, which I hadn't seen since like middle school, so it's been a while. And I remember seeing the DVD cover at Hastings all the time and being like, is this like a horror movie? Because like the tagline is like, remember those games we used to play, and he's in like a dark theater. I was just like, this man's killing somebody. This is going to be radical. And then I watched it and I was just like, oh, okay. But yeah, on my rewatch, I was very, very curious, like, because it starts out and I was like, are they going to, am I misremembering this? But like, do they try to make him out to be like a creepy gay guy type of thing? And I was watching it to make sure, but it's just like, it has nothing to do with that, because nobody knows that besides Chuck. So, but I was definitely on edge of that, of being like, oh, are they going to make him like the creepy predatory guy or anything like that? And that went away after a while. But yeah, I don't remember my reaction when I watched it back in the day. I don't remember if I liked it or disliked it, because it's been so long ago. I do remember one of the best line readings of all time, which we'll get to. But yeah, I really like it. I really like just how involved we are in his world, and also just like how regressed he has been because of this, and how that counters with Chuck's life, who is like, it's the it's the Don Draper thing of I don't think about you at all type thing, where it's just like I have not been able to not only just like process this healthily because I'm stuck as a 10-year-old whatever, to the point where it's just like he likes hanging out with little kids that are going to be in his play until they almost blow off their hand. And that scene also, I was just like, did I forget? Is he like do something? And it's like, no, it's just like it can like Charlie was saying, it can go from awkward to like what's gonna happen. I'm really unsure, and it's just like no, it's just like awkward man child type thing, and really get into that and just how the uneasiness of like the most like awkward part is when he goes to Chuck's party and just like trying to mingle with people, and it's just like he literally can't talk to people.
I really want to talk to Chuck, but thank you for talking to me.
That stream of consciousness dialogue where it's just like there's no filter to this guy, and he's just like the narrow-mindedness is like so funny, where he's just like a man on a mission. It's so funny.
Yeah. There's the great line where he goes to Chuck's office and he was just like, what floor is he on? And it was just like, I got somebody trying to meet you. What's your name? And he just goes, no. And walks away. I'm just like, the fuck?
And that I like that scene too, because it's clear that he knows he's like pushing boundaries and skating on thin ice. It's not like he is totally unaware of how awkward and how he knows he's pushing boundaries at all times, even if he pretends not to, because he's just so heartsick over this man. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I really liked it. From the DV of it all, even though it's, I'm seeing it as it's transferred to film, it definitely just feels much more lived in, and I don't know if you would call this like a prototypical mumblecore film. I think it's a little bit more than that, but I mean it has I would see how a Mark Duplass would watch this and be like, I want to do that, but with less dialogue. But I just really loved
everything.
You said it, I didn't. But I just really love the intimacy that borders on very uncomfortable, and it feels like you're like, I want to go to another character. I'm tired of looking at him too realistic, type thing. But it's just so great how Mike White at the very start can start from just being very awkward man-child to at the end just be like really sad, and you feel for him. And we'll get to all of that. But yeah, I really dug it. Really dug it. I want to watch. Has anybody seen The Good Girl?
Yes.
Their next movie together?
I have. I saw it a very long time ago in high school. I remember like bits and pieces of it more than I do like the whole movie. Really good supporting performance from Zooey Deschanel as like the cashier who like just hates her life and is like, like when she's like handing out groceries, she's like, all right, here's your change and fuck you very much. And then
the only thing I remember, this is a weird memory. I've never seen it. I'm probably going to watch it later on. I've tried to watch it before this, but I remember growing up, I would before school, I would watch a little bit of TV, and there was a channel that would just show movies that were going to be on DirecTV. So it would be like a 30-second TV spot, and I just remember seeing the TV spot for that just over and over of Jennifer Aniston being like asking him about Catcher in the Rye and whatnot. So that's the only thing I know. But I'm looking forward to watching that. But Gavin, as our guest, your thoughts?
I mean, I think everything Charlie said was really beautiful, and I agree. I think there is something as a queer individual watching it, something very personal that you tap into. It's 96 minutes, and I think it's kind of the perfect running time for this film. But I think if maybe the one thing they were robbed about, not that I would want to start it any earlier, is I would like to know more about Buck's relationship with his mother, because I think that also lends a bit to that arrested development that he seems to be having. And it is, I don't know, it's such a hard thing, because I think also, especially looking back at that time period, we're from a generation that still had to hide a bit of themselves. Mike White is from the previous generation of that. And nowadays we have a generation that, like, except for what's happening legally, especially in places like Florida, we're in a generation the generation now is currently very open about this stuff and doesn't have to hide this stuff. And I think that's also a huge damaging thing for Buck, is that he's had this sort of sheltered, cloistered relationship with his mother, with his family. He stayed in his hometown, and which is not to absolve him of any of these things, because he crosses the line several times in the movie, but it is one of those things where he's had to keep this relationship, this love for Chuck, secret this entire time, and that has festered, you know. And so when he finally does actually like fully spell it out for Chuck, you know, when he's like, you know, like, I put my penis in your mouth and you put your penis in mine, Chuck and Buck fucking suck. It's the best line ever. Just it's so awkward, to the point where it's really funny but slightly terrifying.
Terrifying.
Can she hear us?
and that's all because of, you know, this pressure that he's put on, or society's put on him, to like be like, well, this is the stuff that happens in secret. You know, this is not a normal relationship. Like this, you know, because he like checks first. He's like, can she hear us?
Is she asleep?
You know, the wife.
Yeah.
Is she asleep? Yeah, Carolyn. And that's, you know, that's sort of where the emotional stuntedness of wanting to continue this relationship, like it has to carry on in secret as well too, and it can't fully, and you're right, Charlie, there's no hint that he's necessarily ashamed of who he is or what he's doing, but there's also an element of like he does have to keep it buttoned up and kind of behind, or at least the sexual part of it, behind something, like it can never be fully out there or in the truth. I don't know. It's really fascinating. And the only other thing I'll say too is, as an adult watching it, because I hadn't seen it since I was a teen, I think it's more than politeness that Chuck is doing by inviting it, because I do think the way that Chris Weitz plays it is a bit like, okay, I am being nice, but also like there's something more going on, and I'm very curious. I don't want to say like he's encouraging it, but there's like, I think for the average person, at some point they would have cut this off. They'd have been like, okay, no more.
Right.
Like you're scaring the people around me. You're scaring my wife. You're scaring my assistant. Like, no, like, and he doesn't. Right. And I think that there's like an important, deeper thing going on there for him, because I don't think what happens in the end occurs with somebody who's not kind of trying to figure out, you know, a better way of this playing out in the end, because there are ways to stop that without getting to the ending that we got. Right. I'm happy we get the ending we get, but
it could have easily ended with like, restraining orders and stuff like that. Yeah.
Which,
exactly.
If that were the case, he would have got a restraining order as soon as he saw he was in LA. Be like, this is fucked.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bryden, finish us off.
Yeah, I had never seen this before. I've weirdly seen some of like half of Miguel Arteta's other movies. One of the interesting sort of later parts of his career is like, he makes like kind of like cringe comedies, also kind of like about people who are kind of finding their ways in life, or also like Arrested Development types. I mean, Cedar Rapids with Ed Helms is kind of like about a guy who like has never left his hometown, and then is, you know, he's like big boy in a new city, like thinking, what's this new hotel that I'm staying in? Yeah, but then like he also like directs like kids movies as like sort of one-off projects. Like he did like Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, which is like an adaptation of like a children's book. Don't really know.
You can remember that title, but not the Ted Bundy title. What's going on?
Yes.
I had to review Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, and I can't tell you a thing that happens in it.
Yeah, I don't particularly like that movie, and I also, it's been so long that since I've seen it, but I don't know where Arteta's directorial imprint would be visible in that movie. It's just kind of like run-of-the-mill kid stuff, but you know, it's innocuous. But I had never seen this before. Really, really liked it a lot. What's interesting is how easily this movie could like have not worked if like the tone was not just right. It's so interesting how it's able to walk between these sort of three. I mean, the scene that I was talking about briefly with Charlie on a call recently was the scene where where Buck confronts Jamila, the assistant played by Maya Rudolph, outside like the office. There is like kind of like it comes through in the filmmaking and also Mike White's performance how disruptive Buck's presence is. How he just like bursts into scenes like with no announcement and everything. Like when it's like Jamila just like walking with the assistants, and then like
just like, hey,
you know, it comes up behind them like they're passing, and it's like, goodness, like it's so startling, and it is like funny in that cringe comedy sort of way. But then it becomes really sad where he's like saying, "Well, he's not busy. He just doesn't want to see me." And then he just starts crying. And the scene doesn't, but the scene doesn't stop just there. It's also like the sensitivity with like the way the supporting characters treat Buck, where Jamila, the Maya Rudolph character, is genuinely concerned and like goes out to like hug him and like comfort him, but then he just walks away. It's really striking how the movie is amused by aspects of Buck's personality and how he is like kind of a stunted adolescent and also has really no filter. It just really has like no, like it doesn't really like pick up on like social cues of like when people,
like a child.
Yeah, when people don't like want to talk to him, like when like the scene where he goes to see Chuck in his office and Chuck tries to distract him by like showing, "Oh, this is the band I signed," and then like Buck's saying, "Yeah, I really want to go back to hanging out with you." Like he just like so single-minded in this. But like it does have like this surprising sensitivity towards him and humanity, and it's all in like White's performance too. Like there's like this like kind of nervous energy that really makes you feel for the character. There's one scene where he's being asked about like the origins of his play, and like you can, it's like just like he's shot from like the shoulders up, but you can see like from like the way his like body's moving, like he's just like sort of like jittering like in the like below the frame and everything. It's like so it's really like fascinating to watch. But yeah, and he's just like got such like a dry way of like saying like the most like inappropriate things, like when he goes up to them at like his mom's funeral. It's like, "Hey, you guys bored?" Like, it just like, it just tries to sound so relaxed but like so off-putting. Yeah,
he's like, and Chuck is like, "Oh, you look the same," and Buck's like, "You don't. You've gotten fatter."
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that.
Good for. I was just gonna say, good for Chuck for being secure enough, because I'd been like, "Oh."
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. I haven't thought about that today, but now I'm having a good time. Yeah. I forgot to point out that it also won the John Cassavetes Awards at the Spirit Awards, which Blair Witch Project also did. So we've covered 2 of those.
Nice.
Hopefully we can do more.
And
yeah.
I can't remember. Is the Cassavetes Award, is that for directing or for acting? Like, is that focusing?
It's for best feature under $500,000.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a recent conversation about it on Twitter, the worst place to have a conversation, about like if they should abolish it because it encourages like people not getting paid a full wage. And then you had all these filmmakers who are like, actually, like you do pay people a full wage, and like maybe that's a you problem. Like,
yeah. You can make movies underneath $500,000 when people get paid.
Yeah.
Sounds like people that are armchair film people. Yeah. They're like, wait a minute. It's not made for $300 million. How are these people supporting their family? Yeah.
Anyways, I want you all to see my $500,000 Iron Man movie that's coming out next week.
I'd watch the fuck out of that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, it also had a few other nominations at the Spirit Awards and also got nominated at Sundance Film Festival for Dramatic Grand Jury Prize. So yeah, we should talk about what happens in this movie. That'd be nice. Buck O'Brien, which I did not know that was his full name. It's pretty funny. Is a 27-year-old amateur playwright with the maturity level of an adolescence. When Buck's mother dies unexpectedly, he invites his close childhood friend Chuck to the funeral. Chuck is played by Chris Weitz, and Buck is Mike White. Chuck, who is now calling himself Charlie because he's cool, is a successful music industry exec with his fiancée Carlin, played by Beth Colt. He and Buck experimented sexually with each other when they were 11, but Charlie has repressed these memories and acts as if they had not occurred. I feel like saying that in like the first paragraph kind of, because you don't really know that until...
You don't know that, yeah.
Yeah, you don't know that until the infamous scene. Chuck has moved away while they were still children, and Buck has pined after him ever since. During their awkward reunion, Buck makes a sexual advance towards Charlie in the bathroom. Charlie rebuffs him and returns to Los Angeles with Carlin, but not before extending an obligatory invitation for Buck to visit him there. Chris Weitz just plays this whole... You can tell, like we were saying, like, he's not completely annoyed, but he's just like, he acts as if the way where it's just like, I hope you don't say what I think you might be gonna say. I hope you don't say too much. Please don't.
The scene where he invites them up to, where Buck invites them up to his room, both Carlin and Chuck, like, and it's so funny, like just the dialogue where he's like trying to get to his point without saying it. He says like they say like, oh, you should come out and visit us in L.A. It's great. I think Carlin says that, and then like Buck is like, oh, you live out there too? And it's like, yeah, we live together. It's like he like turns away and like so becomes like very introverted, but then like puts on that record, and it's like yeah, you're right, the discomfort where it's like they're smiling and like Buck is like just like totally serene, but then like Carlin's like just sort of like looking at Chuck like, what is going on here? And it's just like it's a very, very strange smile. Yeah,
it is also I like that, Gavin, you brought up the we don't know what the relationship with his mother is, because he is not sad or seemingly sad at all. Like he almost seems indifferent and is just excited to see Chuck or Charlie.
Right.
And it makes me wonder what their relationship was like, if it was like, because, you know, maybe something happened to stunt him, but like, it seems like she'd also be, like, if he was living with her and he's still like this, she either shamed him for being childlike or completely nurtured him to the point that he didn't have to grow, which is also damaging. And it is funny that, like, at his mother's funeral, he's just like he's in the front row and he sees Charlie and he just smiles. Like, his face just beams up. And he doesn't cry at all until after he gets denied, after he makes the advance to Charlie. And that's the first time we see him cry, which I thought was very telling. And it made me think this is a very explicit, like, I bet Mike White thought, do I go into the relationship with his mother or do I leave that out in the open, because it would make my character's tics and you know, like, would that shape him in a harmful way? I wonder if he was got more explicit about it.
I think if you travel too far down that road, like showing it, it becomes a completely different movie.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think it's both ends of the spectrum. You're left sort of wondering.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, on purpose. But I mean, I think that's quite a testament to Mike White's writing, is that he leaves always enough open-ended that you can fill in the blanks for yourself, and only every now and then does it feel like I'm like, oh, just a little more.
Yeah.
But that's what he intends, you know, for you to get out of it as an audience.
Yeah, the detail I love, like, during the opening credit scene is, like, while his mom's, like, coughing, like, her, like, hacking, coughing in, like, the other room, he's, like, showing, like, laying out his clothes, but then, like, he waits a moment and just, like, sort of, like, knocks it over and, like, smiles to himself, like, that's his one act of rebellion that he allows himself, and then and also the close-up of the letter that he writes to Chuck is so funny, where it's like, how are you? I'm okay, except my mom has died. Again, like, just, no way to transition smoothly between the subjects. It's so funny. Oh.
Yeah. Goodness, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I feel like if we were supposed to intimate anything about his mother, Mike White would have put something in there. So it's like we can, you know, pontificate about it, but I feel like it's just we get enough, and also we get not enough to be like, what is up with it? Because I feel like if they really spelled it out, you would not feel as not really suspenseful, but being like what's up with this guy? What is he gonna do with this scene? You know, what happened to him to make it? You know, that type of thing. It keeps you on edge.
Yeah,
you know.
They talk about. I think, like, there's a line from Chuck where he says, like, well, his parents were nut jobs and everything, and his dad wasn't really in the picture. And I think I might be misremembering this from my notes and my memory of the movie, but I think when he goes to, like, Chuck's party, he starts talking about, like, all the games he used to play. He says, like, and then when we got in trouble with our parents when we did, and then, like, Chuck just, like, leaves the room because it's, like, clearly about to be something that, like, is revealed.
Yeah.
So, like, that maybe adds into, like, maybe that's, like, what they did when they were kids. Like, that's maybe, like, attached to, like, the parents' reactions to it. Maybe it's tied to, like, sort of the awkwardness with how, like, the characters deal with it. But again, it's like, it's just suggested.
Right.
What was the other play they wrote? A Devil and the Reindeer, where they team up against Santa?
Yeah, because they both have horns. That's so. That logic is so funny. Like,
yeah.
Well, doesn't Buck say something about, like, yeah, we were doing a play, but then Chuck's mom, like, didn't want him to hang out with me anymore or something like that, where it's like, even that's probably not true. Maybe that type of thing. Maybe that's the way he's compartmentalized it or something like that. But anyways, back to the plot. Buck then withdraws $10,000 from his bank account, which is a very funny scene. Packs up his car and takes up residence in the motel in Los Angeles. Well, because he calls Charlie, and Charlie doesn't answer him back, but he leaves a voicemail saying like, "Oh, we have people over this weekend, but then next weekend I'm out of town. But then you know what? I'll call you back and let you know whenever." And then it immediately cuts to him being like, "Los Angeles? Okay, yeah, I'm going." He also begins scripting a play on a yellow legal pad titled "Hank and Frank and the Witch," an obvious plea for Charlie's love. I don't know how anybody else feels. I kind of feel like the only really detriment of the movie is I feel like the play is kind of not really that necessary. I don't know. Like what do you think?
I kind of like it because I love the character that Lupe Ontiveros plays, and I love how she can see right through this guy. Like everyone else is kind of in the get me away from this person kind of mode, but
she's like, if you're gonna hang around me, you got to pay me $25 an hour.
$25 an hour, but then actually does start to sort of care about the craft of the play and like try and guide him, and is like, you have weird issues with women, you have weird issues with men, this is like clearly some stunted man-child thing, but then tries to help him like cope in a way that makes him act his age, and she still can't get anything out of it, even though, and she's just like, I don't know shit about directing, I'm just, I run the house, so whatever, okay. It did weirdly I know we haven't gotten to the play yet, but it made me think of the Dayman musical episode of Sunny in Philadelphia.
It did.
And I like how everyone in the play is like, we're so fucked. Like, I'm never showing this to my agent. I'm not putting this on my resume. Like, but it does. I also do like that he's able to get away with it because his mom just died and he's fucking rich now, and this is all he cares about. So he's basically willing to throw his entire life away for this really awful and yes, misogynistic play that feels honest. I feel like it is. I was watching this movie going like, oh, if people made this movie now, people would think it's like kind of abhorrent, because as Gavin mentioned before, like we've kind of now the way that people talk about queerness in film, it needs to be more progressive, and like I feel like what part of the reason why this movie works so much is it's such a 2000s time capsule, but like I feel so like people but I feel like people would be like, do we really need this representation right now? Is this really what we need? And it's kind of like, well, it's honest. I kind of like it when it's like
honest and different.
Yeah, I like films about queer people that can be awkward or creepy or even mean, which I think that's equally important. They can't all be gay best friends or they're struggling with the same issues that what I like about it is kind of a coming out story, but it also isn't. It doesn't really fit into any sort of defining genre or subgenre in queer film. Like, I don't really know what you would put this up against when you compare it to something, if that makes any sense.
The Wikipedia calls it a black comedy, and I don't see that. It's a dramedy. I don't see how it's a black comedy. Not a black comedy like Novocaine is, but
it's like cringe comedy, if anything.
Yeah,
like that, like sort of like social awkwardness, like that kind of thing. I think the key to this movie, like, not being like offensive with like the play thing, is like is having like you actually get to know the Carlin character who's like represented in the play as Delilah. It's the fact that she is like pretty accepting, and the rest of the movie is like so sensitive towards like, Buck just being like, okay, like the problem isn't like you being queer, it's just like you need to like that relationship like just isn't going to happen now because like he's emotionally involved with me and everything. Like that's it's fine. Like but like we do care for you as like a person and everything. Like that is like the movie is it's very funny that we're covering this, and it's 2 years before like Van Wilder and 3 years before Boat Trip, which we just talked about. And, like those movies are very regressive.
That's how I tell time. Before Boat Trip, after Van Wilder. Yes.
Yeah. It's also funny that this is our episode following Boat Trip, because
it's like, but it's like night and day in terms of like how. It is like so it's really like kind of accepting and like open-minded and like sensitive towards like these characters like feelings of turmoil and like and like the Paul White's character who like Buck makes a pass at. Like, yes, the character is like wigs out when Buck makes a pass at him, but then like it's not that he just like doesn't have like just because he doesn't reciprocate those feelings doesn't mean that like their friendship can't be possible and everything. He's just like, I just don't want to hump you, but like we can be friends. Like it's totally fine. Like that is like some movies would not even like have that, where it's just like it would just like have the characters wig out and that's all it would be. Yeah, it's really interesting, for sure, as a time.
Yeah, he's such an interesting character. I know you haven't even gotten to him because he's like the most like, it makes sense he ends up in that play because he's the most misogynistic element of the movie as well too. Like every woman he meets, he's like, that bitch.
Yeah,
and like
it's just like, you're good you came over, because if you would have came over when that bitch across the hall was living here, she would have been bitching about that. You should move in because you wouldn't bitch like she bitches. Like he just says it all the time.
Doesn't he also say, I can't stand next to her, I'll hit her? Which I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
that's so funny too. When he makes that suggestion, you see in the background the one actor just like buries his face in his hands, just like this fucking guy. Like can't stand working with him.
Back to the plot. Too shy to announce his presence right away, Buck starts trying to see Charlie at his office at Trimorph Entertainment, which it's a great fake name. Buck also surreptitiously follows Charlie to find out where he lives. While standing in front of the playhouse across the street from Charlie's job, he strikes up a conversation with Beverly, played by Lupe Ontiveros, the house manager. Buck hires Beverly to produce this play and casts Sam, played by Paul Weitz, a talentless actor who bears a strong resemblance to Charlie. I wonder why. Buck then works up the nerve to approach Charlie and his girlfriend. After being invited to a party that Charlie and Carlene host, Buck becomes aware of just how far apart he and Chuck have grown. He feels rejected by Charlie's new friends. Might be there's another deleted scene that happens at this party. I forget who he's talking to, but it really just nails down just how alienated he feels from everybody. And there's a few like kind of deleted scenes, like not like really things taken out, mostly just scenes extended for a little bit. But it's just a great scene where he is trying to talk to people, but the only thing he asks them is, do you know where Chuck is? And then he like is hanging, he approaches Chuck talking with some people, and literally just the mention of Buck saying, when we were younger, he was Chuck and I was Buck, and we were Chuck and Buck, and he's just like, ha ha ha, oh God, please don't say anything else, and the
filmmaking too. I mean, like, just like to talk about like the look of this movie. I mean, I love how like he like walks out, like when Chuck greets him, and he says like, oh, do you need a drink? And like it's clearly visible that like Buck has a drink in his hand, and like that Chuck is just like making like mindless party chat, and then like he immediately leaves, and then like Buck like steps out in the back, and it's like this like sort of like, I don't know if it's like from like the night sky or like the lights on at the party, but like it's like he's just like casting this blue light that just like highlights how like melancholy and lonely his situation is as he's like isolated at this party. And then when like he's leaving the party chatter with like Chuck's work friends, like it holds on the scene a little bit, and like you can hear like someone make a comment. It's like, look at that jacket, like because like that's like something that like, you know, like Buck is wearing like this like, you know, simple like white button up shirt, but also like this kind of like, I guess, vaguely dorky looking blue jacket. And it's just like, it's like the condescension. Like you feel, I mean, yes, this guy's socially clueless, but you feel so bad for him like too at the same time. It's even
little details like the fact that he only orders rum and cokes as his drink. Like, could you come up with a more like it's like the sweetest possible drink you could possibly order? It's also the type of drink that like if a 10-year-old was like trying to
I was about to say, it's just like I've heard adults talk about those types of drinks.
And the blow pops obviously that come up all the time. I mean, and
it's a blow pop lamp. That's so weird.
It's a weird when you find out too what is going on, what actually happened between them. It makes it all the more kind of like, like, you know, blow pop, like, I agree with you, Bryden, and I know that Kevin, you went into the cinematography. It does feel like I do like the look of this movie too, even though I can imagine people watching it today and like you know, saying it looks like shit or something, but it does.
I mean, it does. That's why I like it.
That's why it looks. It feels voyeuristic, especially during that time. Like you feel like you're consistently, you know, in a situation that you should not be observing. Like it kind of is a movie that almost dares you not to leave the room and just stick with it. And then on top of that, maybe I don't remember what order it gets into, but like Buck at one point is just a peeping Tom watching them have sex.
Twice.
That's such a fucking goodness.
Which
and he's like eating.
I completely forgot about that and was just like, oh fuck, like just like that genuinely made me go like, ugh. So
I believe the scene you're looking for is my background right now. I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, I just forgot where in the plot it was, so I'm sorry if I skipped ahead.
It's somewhere around there, and also he's like not even trying to be sneaky. Like if they just looked vaguely in that direction, they would see him. This plot description doesn't really get into the more of the play of it all, but he also hires, you know, two kids to play Hank and Frank in the play, and he hangs out with one of them, where it's so weird, where he's just like, hey, you want a blow pop? Oh, hold on, mom, can I have a blow pop?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're about to eat. Come on. And you're just like, oh, I have them all the time. My teeth aren't bad. And it just goes to a close up of his fucked up. And then the kid's just like, you want to blow up something? And then I guess the kid just doesn't know how to throw a firework after you light it, and it just blows up in his hand. And he's like,
sometimes those fuses are real short. In defense of that child.
I mean, and then he's out of the play because it almost blew up his goddamn hand. And then I don't know if they ever rehire any more kid actors. They just take it out.
Yeah, they
make the adults.
Yeah, they just decide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's why like Paul White's like the character Sam is like asking him like, oh, so am I gonna play it? Like I'm just a little kid. And then there's like the Bev like offers like the insults him by using the R word. And it's like, right, the 2000s, right. It's, but,
yeah. I do appreciate that scene where he almost blows up his hand, because I think Beverly, the Lupe Ontiveros character, she provides context for him when she's like, when we're around children, we have to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's clearly been missing from his life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so... And I think that like helps spur like maybe some growth, even as minuscule as it is. But it like I think that actually does affect him in a way that, you know, there's actually somebody that's taking the time to be like, hey, listen, I can see through all of this, but also like I need you to meet me halfway sometimes.
Right. Yeah. That was the scene though when I was rewatching it. I was just like, I don't know if I'm bringing preconceived, but you are following a very stunted, very awkward. You don't know why he's acting this sort of way in that scene. It's just like, what's gonna happen, dude? And it's like,
I think the movie leaves room for that ambiguity, and I mean, I don't think it's wrong to feel that way. You're constantly the movie's constantly shifting your perception of what Buck is capable of, and I think that's smart as well, because that keeps you as an audience interested, because it's like, is he just beyond reproach? Is he gonna do awful things, or is he somebody that, like, you know, like Charlie said, like he knows he's pushing these boundaries, and you as an audience member sort of have to figure out, like, you know, how
what's next. Yeah, because I feel like if you just laid it all out and then you just be like, oh, he just wants to be with Chuck, he's not gonna do anything, you're just like through the entire movie just being like, oh boy, what else is he gonna do? Because I also feel like, maybe if I rewatched it I'd feel wrong, but when he confronts Maya Rudolph's character outside, it feels like he's like kind of putting on, like being more sad than he is, kind of like, because I also feel like it also, like at the start, it's like he's kind of the person to use his mom's death as a way to get sympathy from Chuck, kind of, you know.
I feel like the pain he's feeling is real, but he knows how to weaponize it against her.
That's kind of what I mean. Yeah. Back to the plot. He also becomes resentful of Carlin, Chuck's girlfriend, wife, which I forget.
Fiance. They get married at the end.
Fiance. They get married. That's right. Who he erroneously believes is interfering with their friendship. As a result of this mindset, Buck's behavior becomes increasingly erratic and obsessive. This just skips to the ending. That's weird. There's a great scene where he apparently makes a collage out of them after he goes to the office and asks Maya Rudolph's character to take a picture with him. He makes a photo collage of a bunch of photos and whatnot and just brings it over to their house at like, I don't know, probably like 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the same scene where Chris Weitz is like, "Hey, Buck, ever hear of using a phone?" Like,
yes.
Yeah, passive aggression that this movie gets is like so spot on. Like, when they first invite him to the party, it's like, oh, like, why didn't you remember to invite him to this party? And like Carlin asks, like, Charlie is like, yeah, should have remembered. Like, as if like you should mention that.
Right, because I think when he first runs into them, he's like, I thought you were seeing your parents or whatever, and he's just like, that fell through. Yeah.
Yeah, the New York trip they canceled, so I didn't go. But at the same time,
that's right.
Very much, it's not okay for him to just show up unannounced and be like, and basically, he knows that he's lying. Like, Buck's smart enough to know that Charlie is lying, and that's kind of what he uses as, again, I'm using the word weaponizing. He's kind of weaponizing Charlie's sense of shame against him for lying to him.
Right, because that phone message he seems is just peak. I got this going, and but I'll reach out to he's not going to reach out to him. Yeah. So yeah, there's that great scene where he's like, Chuck, do you want a drink? Or Buck, do you want a drink? He's like, no. He's like, do you have any ice cream? He's like, I think we do.
No,
okay.
It's Carlin asks, like, you know, do you want, like, I think she asks, like, drink, a bagel, or ice cream? Like, she sort of, like, lands on that, like, as, like, sort of, like, faltering for an option, and then he's like, really? And then, like, like, eating, like, the bowl's already finished, and they're just, like, sitting there, like, waiting.
But that's one of the things I mean about her character is I love the way that she's painted. She's so much smarter than I think most people write these sort of side characters in movies. She's like a well-rounded three-dimensional person, which makes it like, you know, better, because then you're not trained as an audience to be like, oh, the wife, oh my god. And I know she's his fiance, but like that sort of like, oh,
right,
because she's not the person that Buck believes she is.
If anything, it's commenting on that type of character, since the whole play is basically a fantasy about murdering her. I mean, like, and it's kind of like, you know, by making her that fully rounded person and, you know, making it about it not many comedies today are that smart about this sort of thing. And even she calls him, I'm pretty sure it's implied that she's the one who contacts him to go to the diner with her and is like, what's going on? Like, like
we talked about that briefly when you moved away for a moment, but like, I love that scene. That's like one of my favorite scenes in the movie is just them. Mm-hmm. And I think the only time she loses her cool is when they go see the play. And then she's finally like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, which I completely justify.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Completely justify.
And she never, like, Chuck obviously has this passive aggression we're talking about, that she never has that, and also feels like she's never met somebody from Chuck's past at all, so she's like, seems like really interested in him. So like no matter what, when he pops up, she's the one to be like, oh, Chuck, and he's just like, hey, or hey, Buck, and Chuck is like, oh, hi, Buck, how's it going? What do you need? You know, that type of thing. But yeah, that scene. Eventually, he just eats his ice cream, and then he's just sitting there.
I love the cut too. That like after it's already eaten, and then it cuts back to them sitting on the couch, and you know that they were just sitting there in silence for like a good several minutes of just like, okay, like.
And then he's done, and then she's like, I guess I'm gonna go to bed.
And Chuck is like, really? Like, he's like thinking like, please don't abandon me.
Yeah.
Like,
please. Yeah.
But she does kind of have a point there where she's kind of like, well, there's clearly something going on between you two. I want to give you some space. And he's like, no, please, no. Like, and it is interesting because, that's a good point that you bring up, that she hasn't met anyone from his past, because it seems like he's also, like, Buck is not ashamed of his past, but it has completely defined him. And Chuck is entirely just wanting to create this new persona in LA and doesn't want to deal with it. And by not dealing with it in healthy ways, he too is, you know, forced to come to terms with this in ways that, you know, are mainly of Buck's awkwardness and, boundary pushing, methods. But at the same time, he is also kind of refusing to take it on, refusing to confront it head on, and just continues to play games like, I'm a good person, I'm going to be polite, and basically just end this on my terms, but it's also damaging to himself in terms of him being able to move on with Carlin. So, yeah.
Yeah. So Carlin goes to bed. There's also like a really like long shot of her like going up the stairs, going to bed, and then it's finally like, can she hear us? And then he's like, we should play one of those games where I put my dick in your mouth, you put your dick in my mouth, a good old chuck and buck, suck and fuck, which is a fantastic line. And then the cut to Chris Weitz could say a million words. Like, it's so phenomenal. He was just like, I think you should leave. I'm serious. Leave.
Yeah. And
then
like the smile that like, it's like Buck's like smiling. It's like a frozen smile. And then like it just melts as he realizes like, this isn't going to go the way I want it to. It's like, oh.
Right.
Yeah. You're just like wincing as it goes. Yeah.
So I think like right after that, he tries to contact him again. He's like, don't ever talk to me ever again. I don't want to see you. That's what Chuck says. And then eventually he pretty much follows him to a bar where Chuck and a few other people are doing music talk and whatnot. And then he was like, I know you said not to talk to me, but you just give me like 2 minutes. And then they talk, and then he's like, if you just come back to my place, etc., I will leave you alone and everything. And the end of the film deals with both Chuck and Buck confronting each other over their past. The two have sex, and Buck wants Charlie to stay afterwards, but Charlie says they must part ways. Buck is distraught afterwards, but eventually realizes he has found a new life at the Playhouse. When discussing a play over dinner with Beverly, Buck notices Charlie has arrived with Carlin. Chuck and Buck exchange glances across the room, but Buck ultimately disregards them and goes back to his conversation. Buck comes to the theater to find an invitation to the wedding. Buck arrives at the wedding party and offers the couple his blessings with his presence. Buck and Carlin make peace as Buck effectively move on from his obsession with Charlie and keep their sexual encounter a secret from Carlin.
Well, that was what I wanted to ask is, I know the Wikipedia summary says that, but we have no proof of that. And Carlin's smart. Like,
right, because it's like Buck like sees him, and then he's going back to the conversation, and Chuck is like staying on him, and then eventually it's just like, yeah, and then it's like looking down at his food, and Carlin like keeps looking at him, and it's like, does she know or does she not know? Because it's like, what happened? Because he was all over, and then what did y'all talk about? It wasn't just, oh, I told him to leave me alone. She's smart. She knows. Does she know something happens? Who knows? But
and like the conversations couples have behind closed doors, like for all we know, she encouraged it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, I have no proof of that.
Mm-hmm.
I have no, that's wild conjecture. But like, for all we know, she was like, I don't know, go there. If you're feeling this way, if he's feeling this way, like, have it, but be done with it because we're getting fucking married. But once again, like, it's all left ambiguous, and it's better for it, in all honesty.
Yeah. If they even had an explicit like break where it was like, you go have sex with him, and then that, exactly what you said. If we saw that, it wouldn't have as much power to it. Sorry, I cut you off though, Bryden.
No, it's fine. I like Buck finding a place at the Playhouse. It makes me think weirdly of the other Mike White script that we were talking about that was mentioned at the start of the show with School of Rock. How like that movie ends with like both like the kind of like Arrested Development like characters of like Jack Black and Mike White who like they still kind of like yearn for their music rock star days, but then they're like, well, maybe that won't happen for us, but like maybe we can help like shape the future of the youth and like still find a way for our passion to like help out other people, and like that's like kind of like a sweet sort of wrap up for both those characters characters.
Also with the Orange County, where like he eventually learns at the end, he's like, I don't need to go to college to be a big time writer or whatnot. I can stay at home and make my own LA or college or whatever type thing.
Yeah. What do you think about the ending? For me, like, this is like where I like all the endings, but they do feel kind of just like a little bit cluttered. Like, I feel like the ending at the restaurant, that could easily that sort of has the rhythm of like it almost feels like it's the final scene, but then it just kind of keeps going with the wedding invitation. I like the wedding scene at the end where it is again Buck, like on the road to growing as a person, but still like struggling to make conversation at the wedding about like cake is so
he's
good.
wearing a suit though.
Yeah.
He's wearing like adult clothing
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But it maybe just feels like a little bit like tacked on. Like I like both endings. It's just like maybe pick one or maybe adjust like the rhythm just to make it feel like it's more
true.
It's a minor nitpick, but like that's just like one thing.
It does feel a little tidy, but I'm glad that, especially considering like you think about queer films that were coming out around.
It ends on a happy note.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is kind of, is that rare back in the day? Because usually I'm thinking of stuff like, you know, most of these movies kind of ended in tragedy. I mean, Boys Don't Cry was a year before that, and obviously that's based on Brandon Tina. It was a real hate crime that happened, and that was a very upsetting, horrible story. And I'm not saying like every, you know, it gives you a wish fulfillment of like the best possible way this could end realistically, while also feeling like it's a bit conventional. And I like it because it feels very satisfying to me in terms of like what I hope for every character in this film. But I can understand people thinking it's a little contrived, or that they would not even, you know, invite him to the wedding or anything like that. But it is ultimately about, he's not stunted anymore and he's moving on, which, you know, it's a movie that dares you to have empathy for this person who, by all accounts, if you encountered them in a public space, you wouldn't want to get near them. And I guess what I was saying before, it's never mocking, the cringe comedy never comes from the fact that he is queer. It comes from a level of empathy for his shame and not being able to cope with it, and the fact that the movie ends on a hopeful note. You know, it does feel appropriate for this type of film, because I think if it ended on like a darker, disturbing note, or like something, he dies or something horrible happens to him, that would have felt cruel.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking for, by the way. Like, I know,
right.
I'm not saying that's what you think. I think I'm just clarifying. I don't want the movie to end with a massacre or something. That would be awful. But
like Buck kills Charlie, like on his
Fred's
play
like,
set.
I want him to blow up the wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
During the vows, he just reveals he's wearing a suicide bomber vest.
Oh, God.
We know that we've seen this ending, Brendan.
Like he kills Chuck like on the stage of his play, and then like Beverly is just like scene, and then cut to credits, you know. But yeah, that's the end of the movie. Good stuff. But yeah, like you were saying, like even like the new queer cinema movement, which unfortunately didn't last that long in the early 90s, it was definitely deep in drama, deep in tragedy, stuff like that. Like Swoon, and what was that movie you were talking about a few episodes ago, Charlie, about like a gay serial killer that I think Parker Posey is in, right?
Shit.
Frisk? Is that what it's called?
Frisk.
I have not seen Frisk.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
I mean, you are right though, and I think that I love all of the early Greg Araki movies, but yeah, like usually, if I think he's also, those are very angry films, like Doom Generation. I think, mild spoiler for that, but when anything, it's hinted that the two of the characters are queer, and then when something queer happens, something horrible happens to the queer character in the more hetero-leaning people are fine, but I feel like he is making it very much a commentary on queer people being depicted in film, as opposed to, you know, like I'm trying to think of one that's like a terrible example that like.
I mean, think of like all the movies that they talk about in the celluloid closet, where like how like that was like, the thing for so long. It's like, oh my gosh, like they're, and I think Siskel and Ebert really did an episode about like how like, oh my gosh, like so many of these like gay characters in like these movies in like the 80s and 70s are just like meeting like those most horrible fates. And like, yes, those are two straight critics talking about it, but it's like even they were like, goodness, like tone this down just a little bit. Like we don't need to like go this route all the time. It's with like with the like violent ends and tragic ends. That's what I mean. But they were
exactly. I mean, even something like I mean, I love Brokeback Mountain, but even Brokeback Mountain ends with one of them dying. Sorry, just mild spoilers. I mean, I don't have a problem with that at all. I love that movie, but it is like, it was a trick.
I mean, I think that's the not to get too deep on that because that's another movie we were talking about, but I think that's the kind of the thesis of the short story too, is that like. It's a much darker, which is not to say I do love that movie as well, but yeah, the that's like maybe the one thing I don't like about Brokeback Mountain is that like it's even more devastating because it's really about this person in a way similar to this that can't get on with their life after losing this love of theirs. So
yeah,
but and I do feel like the movie scapegoats it just a tiny bit, gives it a bit of the like catharsis that you're looking for in the short story, and the opera that's based on the short story that she wrote the libretto for both carry that in a little deeper about like, oh well, everything's fucked. It sucks forever.
Yeah. Another one that just came to mind is I like this movie a lot too, but Monster is like especially like
based on a true story again, so like
again, yeah, exactly. But those were the ones that were like getting like Monster and Boys Don't Cry were the ones that were getting most like attention, and both actresses won Oscars for their portrayals of actual queer people who, you know, had a horrible life and died. And I like, you know, I haven't seen Boys Don't Cry in a very long time. I'm kind of scared to revisit it.
It's complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a complicated time capsule of a movie. It's
like, is Boys Don't Cry a good movie? Well, I have 19 caveats, but yes. That type of thing.
Yeah, it's... So, yeah, I think that it seems like during this day and age, I mean, it seems... It's also kind of a relief because you are squirming for about 95% of this movie, and then you're finally allowed to be like, okay, everything's going to be fine. Like, everything's going to be okay. Even if it's not the outcome that either of them wanted, it's going to be okay. So...
It also helps that it's so funny, like so frequently.
Yeah.
Like it's often peppering it with like
Yes.
really great punchlines. Is that like I think that's like sort of helps alleviate the discomfort, even though they are kind of like inextricably tied. Yeah.
Right. I think final thoughts, at least for me, is as far as we're talking about the ending, it's really relieving to see somebody who has latched onto something for 27 years and finally gets a release from it, that like their entire life doesn't have to be like it's like, I mean, it's just like a breakup pretty much, even though they were never together, quote unquote. But it's just like the fact that he is able to continue after this, it didn't break him. If anything, it made him finally open up and be able to do things, and I think that's really awesome. But yeah, I do feel like the quote-unquote best and most impactful scene would have ended at that restaurant, but I'm able to let it go that it ends on such a positive note, is the type of thing. Charlie, do you have any final thoughts on Chuckley and Buckley?
Not really, but yeah, I mean, as someone who's had unrequited crushes on straight friends, it definitely makes me feel seen in a way that I'm like, I hope was never this odd or creepy at times, but I do think that it helps, even though I'm like 31 now, even watching this, you know, a couple days ago, revisiting it is kind of like it does capture that, you know, as I've been saying this whole episode, it really does capture how being so lovesick can emotionally stunt you, but there is like ultimately, yeah, you can move on. Like, God, I'm getting so fucking mushy gushy, but you know what I mean. Like,
It's fine.
Yeah, that's basically all I have to say.
Right, and it shows the unrequited love and the love sickness, but not just melodramatic and really deep and whatnot. It's just like how it can really mess with somebody and make them stay in a state of mind where all of that was intact and everything was good. It's like, why would I want to advance and live in this horrible reality where my mom is slowly dying and whatnot? I would rather, you know, stay prepackaged whenever I was like 10 years old and I had a great friend and whatnot. So, yeah. Bryden, final thoughts?
Yeah, I was really just kind of struck by how, like, for like a movie that is like, I think a classification as like a dark comedy, like it is able to toe the line between like empathy and also kind of amusement at like its character's Arrested Development, where like it views him as a human being who is like very ridiculous, but also feeling like very torrid emotions and like navigating and like going between those like kind of different emotional registers without like severe whiplash. I feel like, you know, the discomfort and comedy are both like the comedy and the drama are both rooted in like the same kind of like genuine emotion and pain that the movie's kind of like rooted in. And I like, I guess I do feel like the ending is like maybe a little too neat. But then again, I also like was looking through my notes. I like the kind of like the small ambitions of like the characters, like the smallness of like the characters achieving their ambitions. Like Bev gets to like direct plays, but it's like, just like the local production of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and like that's like, and you know what, that is like a nice win for her. But it is like small scale, and I that's like that feels more true to life than like them like going on to like direct a best-selling show. I don't know. I like that part of the movie. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I'm glad I got to catch up with it.
Gavin, last thoughts?
I think it's interesting now that we're recently, not that it's a new conversation, but because of stuff that happened on Twitter recently, that we're sort of now having the conversation again about a universality versus specificity. And I think this movie falls perfectly into that because it is such a specific thing, and that's what makes it great. It's about a very specific person in a very specific situation, but universally everybody's experienced a love that they've felt for somebody that's unrequited. They've maybe had thoughts that are like, oh boy, don't do that, don't act on that. Hopefully they've stopped themselves from acting on it. And I think that's what makes this film so great, is it's clearly very personal and very cathartic. But I think there's, the audience should have an ability to latch onto it and see these people for who they are, because it is so well-rounded and so smartly written. And I do think the like oddness of the DV helps with that. I don't know how much that in-person sort of how close it gets to them maybe would have worked on film. I mean, it certainly would be a very different looking movie, and therefore probably a very different film in general. So yeah, I think it's quite a film that holds up a lot, and I was very happy to revisit it.
Now I'm wondering if it was shot on film and if it was like a Universal focus feature movie at the time, like who would have played Chuck and Buck? Very curious.
Oh, what's his face from Power of the Dog?
Cody Smith McPhee.
Yeah, Cody Smith McPhee would have been Buck. 100%.
That's pretty good.
I also had like a weird thought of like, what if they just remade this movie but with Clifford, with Martin Short's Clifford from Clifford?
Yes. Oh my God, I both hate you and love that. Take my money.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at KevBonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at JDoyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CTNash91. Once again, thank you for listening.